I normally don't cover things from YouTube on this channel, but I decided to make an exception here because one, this is close enough to a TV show that I feel like it's fair game, and two, it's something that holds so much sentimental value that I just have to talk about it. The exception I am making is for YouTuber Jianhao Tan and his series Titan Academy. I adore this series. What may seem like a series of random, unrelated skits is actually so much more. These videos have lore, continuity, and most importantly, great characters. When I was in high school, from around mid-junior year to late senior year, I watched these videos daily. I would anxiously await every Sunday morning to see whatever antics Class T1T5 got up to. I saw myself in these characters in ways I had never seen in a work of fiction before. During a time in my life that at times got a bit lonely, seeing a series about a class that usually had each other's backs while still having all the problems and antics of high school made Titan Academy the perfect escapism for me. The friendships these characters had with each other were what I dreamed about having at that age. Unfortunately, towards the end of my high school experience, I noticed something about these characters starting to change. The truly beautiful bonds the characters had formed over the course of the series were breaking down in favor of shallow love triangles. The characters themselves became flanderized, hateable versions of who they once were, or just left the show altogether. It hurts to see this particular series suffer seasonal rot because of how much it means to me. I can ignore the downfall of a show that I don't care about or think is just okay, but seeing a show that you love go downhill hurts all the more when you're emotionally attached to the characters. After well over a year of not being as invested as I once was, I started to wonder, was Titan Academy ever the masterpiece I remembered it as? Did it really get as bad as I remember? And is it starting to get better? I'm going to answer all of these questions today by going through the entire series, season by season, and documenting the rise and fall of Titan Academy. A disclaimer that since most of the characters have the same name as their actor, in this video, unless stated otherwise, I am referring to the characters. Titan Academy actually wasn't initially planned as a series. It was originally just another video by humble YouTuber Jianhao Tan called Good Students vs. Bad Students. However, this particular video blew up in popularity and caused him and his team to decide to make more school-themed videos. Season 1 is the era where Titan Academy was just that, a series of school-themed skits. The plots had no depth beyond types of students in blank, and the characters really didn't either. Even those whose basic traits were consistent, like Denise being the smartest student and Jinhao always failing, really didn't go beyond that. And some of the students were completely different, like Ben being the top student in one episode. That said, as one-off skits go, these were good, funny, and surprisingly edgy for this series.
At least I came, my period didn't.
Season 2 is where Titan Academy really finds its footing as a series. Class T1T5 is now starting to look like what we all know it as. We're introduced to some really iconic characters this season, like Miss Shirley, Terry, and Julin. And better yet, the characters that were introduced in Season 1 are now given far more depth than before. For instance, Denise is still the smart one, but we now get to see how lonely this has made her and how she's isolated from her peers. Jianhao is still a troublemaker, but is shown to have a heart of gold. Rennie Xiang starts off the season still very girl crazy, but when the girl of his dreams is taken away from him, it's really interesting to see how he reacts. Madam Soup Bing is still the strict teacher, but this time it's shown to be because she deeply cares about her students. There is still some early installment weirdness, especially early in this season, some of the characters, but I think by the end of this season, even these characters do start to become more like their more iconic selves. So the significant relationships of the series are established in this season. We get to see Debbie simping over Ben. We see Kevin and Reniseong hang out a lot. Although in the early seasons they had Kevin in love with Reniseong, which would get phased out over time. We also see both Reniseong's crush on Pei-shi and, after their breakup, his bitterness towards her. And most importantly, we get the main love triangle. Now they establish up front that Vincent plans to win over Denise by making inappropriate comments, while Jianhao wins her over by simply showing her kindness. This will later be what ruins the series, but I find that here it works kind of in spite of Vincent's behavior. They don't beat you over the head with it, and they add enough childishness to his character to show that he is still growing. They were really smart to introduce Terry, as that gives something both Jianhao and Vincent can work together on, as Terry is way worse than Vincent. Season 2 is also where the show becomes unafraid to hit its audience in the feels. Probably my favorite scene in the season is just Denise being unable to find somewhere to eat because everyone rejects her, and having to eat in the bathroom. It's genuinely one of the saddest moments in the entire series. You just want to reach through the screen and give poor Denise a hug and tell her that it's all going to be alright and be your friend. It's so satisfying when Jianhao finally shows her a little bit of kindness. It really shows just how lonely he's become by focusing all her energy on academic pursuits when all she needed in reality was a friend. We also get Reniseong's heartbreak and Madam Soup Bing being fired. Reniseong's heartbreak is used to set in motion his character arc. He started by being defined by his desire to have Pei-shi as his girlfriend, so when she basically cheats on him in his eyes, it makes sense that he would become cynical, as he feels like the person he loved the most now betrayed him. As for Madam Soup Bing, her firing shows that as strict as she can be, she really does care about her students, in contrast to Miss Shirley, who at this point only cares about helping the bright students and being liked by the rest. What I love about these moments is that they never felt like they were just trying to hit you in the feels to make you cry. They were always saying something about the characters. It's also a lot funnier than Season 1, with a lot of the humor coming from the characters' personalities, and even a few jokes that foreshadow future storylines.
Even give it to us. What if I get expelled for this? I can't lose my school. My mom's gonna kill me. My dad's gonna kill me. Why if the school all closed down because we're all doing so badly? Why if all of Titan students have to split up?
Like any good second season, Season 2 doesn't abandon what made the first season work. It's still simple types of skits, but now it's these simple school skits, now with a bit of depth. It has all the humor of the first season, but now that we know the characters, they opened up a whole array of comedic and storytelling potential. Season 3 is a major shift away from Class T1T5 in favor of introducing a new class, N4T1. I'm not the biggest fan of them, but I don't hate them. I just don't think they have the same charm or depth as Class T1T5. That being said though, even though these characters don't have a ton of depth, they are still consistently funny. This season came out during a little time period you may remember as COVID. A lot of the plots revolve around that. Also parody a lot of fads from around this time, doing an entire Among Us episode, doing a lot of TikTok references. This is where this being a YouTube series comes in its favor. You can tell that the people writing this are consistently on the internet and understand these words and fads. They also do a good job at showing their appreciation for these trends without feeling like endorsements. Like, they still will poke fun at certain aspects of them.
We don't need facts, we just need to know who is sus.
Class T1T5 isn't out of the picture. Kevin appears in just about every episode. And how Nicole and Renice Young had siblings in N4T1s. Starting to see things like Denise being a bit more accepted by the group and Vincent's worst traits being toned down. Miss Shirley is probably the biggest winner of this season. You can tell that after she got Madam Soup being fired, she really did feel bad about it and strived to become a better teacher. As a result, she is not only more likable, but also probably a bit funnier, as now she gets quite a few snarky lines and is now willing to put her foot down. Now let's talk about the highlight of Season 3. The short film, I Am a Teacher. This is easily the most ambitious thing Titan Academy has ever done. It completely abandons the skit-based format and even the comedic tone to tell a genuinely emotional story and dive deeply into Madam Soup Bing as a character, showing her conflict between following her passions and being able to provide for her daughter after she was fired. It really dives deep into her relationship with Vicky, as even though she really wants to be a teacher, she ends up taking a job at a restaurant. It shows that as much as she loves teaching, she's willing to put aside her passions and her pride for her daughter. And Vicky herself goes through a great character arc where she learns that while maybe her mother can't provide everything that she wants, she's still willing to go through anything and everything to make sure Vicky is safe and happy. This is in contrast with Vicky's father, James, who acts like he cares about Vicky at first, wanting to give her a seemingly better life working for him and dropping out of school, but really ends up ignoring her and making decisions in his own self-interest. And dude, that ending where Madam Soup Bing and Vicky reconcile is just one of the most heartwarming scenes in the show. This is an amazing short film. By the end of the season, all of the early characterization kinks have officially been ironed out, and nowhere is this more apparent than with the penultimate episode, Types of Students Back to School. It shows that Trev is no longer the spoiled rich kid. He's now totally broke and always crying, which is the way I like him. Julien is now commenting on how mean Ben is to Debbie, and most importantly, it finally fleshed out Vincent. With him being unable to cope with all the changes that came after the virus, it creates a sense of sympathy and relatability to him that we've never seen up until this point. It shows his insecurities and fear of change, which are what made me like the character to begin with. I actually wasn't expecting to have a lot to say about Season 3, Thought I'd just talk a little bit about N4T1, say what I wanted to about I Am a Teacher, and be done. But really, I ended up enjoying the season a lot more than I thought I would. I'd still say season 2 might be a teeny bit better due to it being a bit more consistent, but I love this season too. Season 4 is where everything finally comes together for Titan Academy. It feels like a fully fledged TV show. You can tell that the creators realized that the fandom was passionate about the series, and so they added more story and even some lore. The story here is more serious and engaging, the stakes are higher, and the characters more identifiable, complex, and relatable than ever before. Season 4's premiere sets the tone not only for the season, but for the rest of the series. It's about an evil organization taking over Titan Academy, and Miss Shirley having to decide between leaving as to not see what this organization does to her students, or staying to protect them. This episode introduced the main villains for the rest of the series, the organization. They're a great satire of how profit-based education can get when controlled by the wrong people, and how that comes at the expense of the students. Like, I went to a private school, just like Titan Academy, and I know that funding for education does have to come from somewhere. But the organization very clearly crosses the line between actually funding students' education and just exploiting both students and parents in order to maximize profits. They ask to implement some pretty insane rules. They constantly keep saying that they're there for the students, but all they can talk about is profit and their reputation. They also serve as a really great threat. Once the students learn about them, they have to watch their every move, because if they upset the organization in any way, they could get expelled and humiliated. But also, it shows just how much Miss Shirley has grown as a person since her debut. In her first appearance, she wasn't too different from the organization, but here, she's willing to fight tooth and nail so that students can get the education they need and deserve. Her decision to stay and protect them not only shows how much she's grown, but cemented her as my favorite teacher and one of my favorite characters in Titan Academy. Season 4 isn't all doom and gloom, though. We get some of the best jokes and skits of the entire series. These skit-based episodes are less about asking what types of people are in these situations, and more about asking how would each of the characters handle this situation, which leads to a wider variety of comedy. You can't talk about the best season of a show without mentioning that show's best aspect, and all of T1T5 is at their absolute best here. Nobody feels like an extra. They all have a unique personality and role to play. Denise is now officially out of her outcast era. She now has a group of friends she sits with at lunch. She's still doing homework, but at least she's not on the toilet. And she is good friends with both Jianhao and Vincent. She even gives some advice to Cleverly about opening up to people. She even partakes in a little bit of Class T1T5's mischief. However, this does not mean they forget about her intelligence or how good she is at being the wooby. Towards the end of the season, we get to meet her mom, the one character more hateable than anyone in the organization. It turns out that the reason Denise studies so hard and is such a perfectionist is because her mom actively berates her for even the slightest mistake. This bitch openly tells her daughter that she's embarrassed of her because she got a 99 on an exam. The scene kind of implies that the only reason why Mrs. Taylor acts like this is so that she can boast about her daughter. This one scene honestly recontextualizes everything we know about Denise. Sure, it shows why she's so smart academically, but it also shows why she's so isolated and anxious. Jianhao gets some character development this season. With Denise's help, he makes a conscious effort to study for the exam. He even manages to pass. Even though they're not a couple yet, it's clear that both he and Denise are starting to rub off on each other, with her becoming more outgoing and him becoming a bit more studious. That's why I love them together. They so clearly make each other better people in addition to really caring about each other. Vincent's also really likable here and is written more childish than anything. He still tries to get Denise to be his girlfriend, but at least he's not under the delusion that she already is.
And the funny thing about Vincent is that he thinks he has a chance with Denise.
The writers at this point in the series were making a conscious effort to portray Jianhao, Vincent, and Denise as actual friends who just happen to be in a love triangle. Like, sure, Vincent can still be boisterous, inconsiderate, and even kind of a bully at times, but that's just part of his character. Towards the end of the season, we're introduced to Maddie, a kind yet assertive student who is in Vincent's class when he and Debbie are transferred to N4T1 for an episode. Vincent quickly takes a liking to her because she listens to how he feels about being in a new class and understands how much he doesn't like it. She even stands up for him, even becomes kind of a morality pet to him. He almost doesn't even participate in the heist because of her, and when he does, he makes sure that she'll be in T1T5 with him. Maddie herself is a great character too. She's so wholesome and earnest that it makes sense why Vincent would quickly form such a strong liking to her. Kevin is also given a fitting character arc in this season. Throughout the first 3 seasons, he's been picked on quite a bit and taken offense to quite a few things that weren't even intended to be mean. This season takes his feeling of being disrespected and uses it as his motivation to become the school hall monitor. They do make sure he stays likable and is never fully on the organization side. I'd say his dynamic with Renee-seong this season is generally sweeter since it's now taken more seriously. It became less of a gag here and is now more of a genuine friendship. When Renee-seong gets expelled, Kevin reacts like he's losing his best friend. Once this happens, he realizes how bad the organization is and gives up his power. Renee-seong, meanwhile, is at the peak of his meanness. He's always trying to act tough, takes every opportunity to antagonize Pei Shi, and is normally just trying to push people away.
We're not friends, Kevin.
This could have easily made him unlikable, and I'm sure to some people he is, but personally, I relate to Renee-seong. When I was at that age, I tended to push people away and took true friends like Kevin for granted. Tasha is given a well-established personality as the conspiracy theorist. Trev and Abby have a great dynamic. We see a lot of Ben and Debbie's usual dynamic. Juhi and Terry are actually in a relationship for most of the season, although this comes to a sad end when Terry, the scumbag he is, breaks up with her for failing. Hakim is shown to be dumber than in previous seasons, and even Julian, who isn't terribly important yet, does gain some prominence as Sherilyn's best friend. And speaking of which, Sherilyn manages to use her catchphrase to save everyone except herself. N4T1 is still fairly prominent, but I'd say they're better balanced with T1T5 this season, and they're more interesting, especially with Diana, who begins dating Cleverly in this season. We actually see Diana change her bullying ways when she starts to fall for him. And this is what I like about the relationships in this series. They weren't just pairing up random characters, they were carefully planned out to help with the character arc. And that's why it's so sad when the organization expels Cleverly. This arc Diana has is what made her my favorite N4T1 character. We get Madam Soup Bing's return. She does appear to agree with a few of the organization's policies, but you can tell that she's not fully on their side because she clearly does still care about her students. It would have been out of character for her to fully join Team Regna. She'll still call out Mrs. Regna when her practices are actively harming the students' educations. We get the debuts for various new teachers. Most seasons have an exam arc, but this season exam episodes are completely distinct from the others, simply because there are actual stakes. Mr. Allen and Mrs. Regna have set up the exams so that anyone who doesn't pass will get expelled. And worst of all, they're going to be harder than usual. The added tension makes this particular exam arc not only stand out, but it makes it easily the best exam arc in the series. Half of Class T1T5 gets expelled, and the other half gets shuffled into various other classes. Most of N4T1 also gets expelled. After a few episodes of mourning and Vincent making a new friend in Maddie, a few of T1T5 and N4T1 students come together and perform a heist to bring all the students back. This mostly works, except for one major loss. Sherilyn sacrifices herself so that everyone else can go back to school. This is the first season to really dive into the bond T1T5 has with each other as a whole. We see them being there for each other, having fun together, and working together a lot in this season. This is essential to the emotional stakes of the season because it centers on the idea that they could get expelled and never see each other again. And finally, this is the season that was coming out when I got into Titan Academy. The Squid Game episode was the very first episode that I saw, and it got me into watching more episodes. I eventually got to the exam results episode, and that's where I realized that there was more to these videos than just skit. It was an actual series with continuity and consistent characterization. And with that episode, I became genuinely invested in the story and wanted to see where they went with it now that T1T5 was split up. The heist episode was the first episode that I remember anxiously awaiting, and I watched it several times the day it came out. 4 is about as perfect as a season of Titan Academy can get. It has just as much, if not more, humor, heart, and charm as the first 3 seasons, but it also gave us a suspenseful, interesting story, actual lore, satire about modern education, and so much more. With Class T1T5 mostly back to normal, Season 5 pushes the organization into the background a little to focus more on the characters, their arcs, and their relationships. N4T1, however, is not the same. Towards the end of season 4, we got a bunch of new characters that were admittedly pretty shticky, but I think that's okay. The only one worth mentioning though is Teverly, who's working for the organization. As for the old students, I love Diana and Chloe's friendship. They became friends through the heist. Renee character arc of letting people back in is completed this season. He's revealed to have a hard family life, so his friends and teachers decide to reach out to him and give him the financial aid and support he needs. For the first time since that fateful breakup, he realizes that he is loved and cared for at school. He finally opens back up to people. Unfortunately, the very next episode seriously undercuts all of Renee Young's development. While the rest of the episode is actually pretty funny, the ending sees Renee Young getting hit in the head and basically reverting back to his original personality in like season 1. This kind of undid one of the best character arcs in the series. While later episodes would somewhat backpedal on this, implying that he did at least learn a few things from those experiences, this episode ends with him yelling,
Patient! Patient! Patient!
I honestly think this might have been a bit of a turning point for the series. If the very next episode hadn't been the best episode of Titan Academy, Types of People Stuck on an Island is pretty much perfect. I could go on about really any scene, but for now I just want to talk about the campfire scene, which is not only my favorite scene in the episode, but in all of Titan Academy. This scene sees Renee Young sing such a beautiful song about his and Class T1T5's bond.
I know it's been a super long day. Things could have been better, but it's okay. 'Cause I know that we got each other.
It shows that at the end of the day, they are all true companions and really care for each other. It at least implies that Renee Young's arc wasn't in vain, as he has grown to love and care for his friends like family. The other part of the scene that I love is that Jinho and Denise finally get together. They're not only my favorite couple in Titan Academy, but in all of fiction. And I'm not even much of a love story guy. I don't always like when shows that I enjoy give the main characters romantic arcs. But I feel like Denise and Jinho handled it perfectly. Throughout the first 4 seasons, they showed why they would be great for each other and why they benefited and cared about each other. Denise needed a friend and a confidant. Jinho needed motivation. They both make each other better people. Also, I think they got together at the perfect time in the series. They had managed to set up their relationship and what they saw in each other without making the will they won't they aspect of their relationship obnoxious, and they avoided romantic plot tumors. This season loves exploring Denise's flaws.
Chanel and Denise are being super distracting.
While the previous seasons would portray things like her perfectionism and her social ineptness as flaws, this season would often show off smaller flaws like her being bad at art. They also run with the idea that her mother is a big source of anxiety for her. Even if Mrs. Taylor doesn't appear in this season, they make it clear that Denise is afraid of disappointing her mom.
If I die on this island, my mom is gonna kill me.
And as for Jinho himself, his relationship with Denise is the biggest change. He isn't terribly studious in this season, but he is willing to try for her. It's clear that his work ethic isn't what Denise likes him for. She likes him for his positive qualities like his kindness and leadership skills, which we see a lot of in this season. We get our first and so far only flashback episode, and while it is a little weird to see that all the adults were in Titan Academy at the same time, gotta admit it is cool to see their past. Debbie finally stands up to Ben after 4 seasons of him just walking all over her. This sets into motion his character arc of caring more about what's right than what other people think. They've already set up that he does it out of peer pressure, so it does feel natural that you would miss Debbie's respect once he loses it. And this also shows Debbie herself learning to stand up for herself. Now that Maddie's in T1T5, it brings a new dynamic to our main characters, being the one who can often tame Vincent's less likable traits. She's characterized as someone who's very sociable and can easily make friends. She's kind of a foil to Denise, since Maddie is extroverted, a bit lazy, and can quickly make friends with anyone, while Denise is more introverted and hardworking to a fault. But they still show that Maddie does have some strengths that Denise doesn't, like art. Maddie is a little clingy at times towards her friends, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It's never excessive at all, and I think it's a believable flaw for her to have, since A, she's shown to be a very friendship-driven person, and B, she bonds with these people really quickly.
There's not another group of people I'd rather be with. I'm glad we're doing this together.
We also get to see her hidden badass side that we saw in her first appearance a few times. I love that running gag of bullies always being afraid of her, because it juxtaposes her normally really nice personality and shows that she isn't a pushover. Maddie was kind of like the friend I wished I could have had. Vincent is at his most lovable. He absolutely dotes on Maddie this season, always praising her efforts. Maddie was really the only character he was consistently 100% kind to. The only scene where he kind of neglects her is with the ice cream, but that was so trivial, made him look more stupid than downright cruel, and even that was played as more a contrast to how he normally acts. They do make it clear, though, that he does miss being a trio with Jinho and Denise. When they start dating, they start leaving him out of more of their activities, which causes him to get a little jealous. He even gets them sent to the back of the class. This notorious crime, as notorious as it is still understandable, as we all had that one couple in high school that just couldn't stop with the PDA, and no one likes having to sit by them. The worst thing Vincent does in this season is selling out Jinho to the organization after the fire, but even then, I understood where he was coming from. He genuinely believed that it wasn't his fault that the fire happened, and he didn't want to face Mrs. Regna's wrath. Plus, that scene was hilarious. Even when they do make him kind of a jerk, they always make him likable and make him work. This is Vincent's best season. Kevin at this point is purely just a friend to Renee Seong, and when he's not with Renee Seong, he's usually just being Captain Wacky. We get a lot of Trev and Abby. They break up in the island episode, but neither character is phased out. This is also Julin's big breakout season. I remember when Sherilyn first got expelled, I thought Julin would fade into the background, but I could not have been more wrong. They really amp up her clumsiness and misfortune, and provide so much comedy from both the things that happen to her and her reactions to them. Early in the season, she destroys Nicole's painting, so Nicole vows to destroy Julin. This leads to one of the funniest rivalries in the series, with Nicole tormenting Julin in hilariously over-the-top ways. Julin also takes the role of Debbie's best friend, even standing up to Ben for her. This was originally Tasha's role, but Tasha mysteriously disappeared. While I don't think her conspiracy theorist personality would have been quite as useful in a less organization-heavy season like this, I liked her enough to miss her. Miss Shirley once again shows what a great teacher she is. She initially reaches out to Renee Seong about the school's financial aid program, but my favorite Miss Shirley moment in this season is when she attempts to take the blame for the fires. This really shows that Miss Shirley grew from a teacher who didn't even care about her students to a teacher who would take a bullet for them. Season 5 is one of the very few seasons not to have an exam arc, and I think that's for the best, since there was no topping Season 4's exam arc. Even though the stories are very character-driven, they don't completely abandon the stakes and tension of Season 4. I'd argue that the fire episode is one of the few, if not the only episode, to actually put the characters in real peril. They also discuss the possibility of never making it out in the island episode, and the season finale does have Jinhao and Vincent at risk of expulsion, and Miss Shirley at risk of getting fired. But luckily, this might be the first time that the organization's greed actually did benefit the students and teachers, as Mr. Allen feels that he can't afford to expel any other students or fire any more teachers. I mean, sure, he does still use them for free labor, but better than them being expelled altogether. Heading up the Night School series. Season 5 is another amazing season. I still think I'd give Season 4 the edge due to it being a bit more consistent, but overall, I would consider Seasons 4 and 5 to be the golden age of Titan Academy. Season 4 was the season that got me into Titan Academy and made it one of my favorites. Season 5 is the season that kept it as such because these were the episodes that I woke up to on Sunday mornings. This might be the season that I have the most nostalgia for. Around the time Season 6 began, maybe a little before, Jinhao Tan himself did a community post asking what fans wanted to see as they prepared for the final season. This implies that they had one, maybe two more seasons left, and I think that's a good call, as that would have been the right amount of time for the series to wrap up at this point, and I think Season 6 is starting to show that they're ready to end. I still really enjoy this season, but you can definitely tell that the series is going downhill with rehashed plots, major cases of flanderization, and just not always the same level of passion as the last few seasons. The first just under half of the season is composed of a little mini spin-off about Miss Shirley, along with Jinhao and Vincent, having to teach the night school, which is a mixture of existing side characters and new characters. While some of these characters aren't very developed or interesting, and I think the Night School series could have been a bit funnier, it does do a great job at capturing the heart that makes Titan Academy so special, with characters like Annabelle. I'd say it's definitely worth it. The Halloween episode played a major role in the series' downfall. It's in and of itself a really great episode, but it marked a certain shift in the series. In this episode, Vincent and Maddie are now a couple and go to a Halloween party dressed up together. Unfortunately, Vincent sees Jinhao and Denise dressed up together, and as usual, his typical FOMO kicks in. He betrays Maddie and changes his costume to match theirs. This is probably the last time in the series where I found his actions and motives both in character and understandable, even if he is honestly being kind of a jerk. He still appears to like Maddie in this episode, but at the end of this episode, he drops this line.
Denise, I've been thinking about it. I want you.
This is where everything went south for his character. He's the most annoying and unlikable he's been so far. The writers stopped trying to portray his character with the nuance and likability we've seen for the last few seasons, and started portraying him as just an obstacle. I'm not against the idea that he still has some feelings for Denise. The main problem, though, is that they end up changing both his and Maddie's characters to do this. If they did want to continue Vincent going after Denise, I really wish they would have kept him and Maddie as friends, because their friendship was so endearing and interesting. After the Halloween episode, though, Vincent kind of seems to actively hate Maddie. He constantly neglects her. He will take any excuse not to spend time with her and makes no attempt to hide that he's still into Denise. This is the point where the show became really obsessed with shipping. Up until this point in the series, relationships were built off of how they would benefit the story and each individual character arc. Now they're just trying to start a shipping war. Maddie is also affected by Vincent's character change. She was always a little clingy, but it never went beyond going to school while sick to see him, and it made sense because he was actually nice to her. She still had her own set of quirks and friends that were independent of him. Now her entire character is that she likes Vincent and constantly wants to spend every waking minute with him, even though he can't stand her. She blindly takes his mistreatment of her, despite the fact that in previous episodes she was shown to be able to be very assertive when necessary. Remember how quickly Maddie bonded with her classmates? Well, now she doesn't seem interested in anyone except Vincent. Maddie went from being one of the most quintessential examples of the friend we all wish we had to just a one-dimensional love interest. We get another exam arc like in the old days, but unlike Season 4's exam arc, there's not nearly as high of stakes and not really any unique spin on the formula. It just feels like the same exam arcs we saw in the earlier seasons. This signifies that the season is running out of ideas and just trying to recapture old charm and play it safe, rather than taking risks and raising the series to new heights like the previous two. This may be the most topical season to date. Titan Academy had always referenced what was popular, but this takes it to a whole other level. We get several episodes about things like the World Cup and a Wednesday parody, and many jokes throughout the season that would honestly confuse people who weren't around at the time. I was a teenager at the time, and even I didn't get all the jokes. Here they're more focused on referencing things than actually fitting these references into the world and story. Seems to be a new student in like every other episode. This at best creates a funny gag, but is mostly just forgettable. Like when Maddie was new, it was a big change. These new students just come across as guest stars, with Ashley being the only one who had any staying power at all. This makes T1T5 feel like less of a class we all know. We're starting to see less and less of some of the characters like Juhi and especially Terry. You can tell who the writers are favoring. That said, this is probably the last season to feature those characters. One of the things this season does that I do really like is resolve the war between Julian and Nicole. Ben is actually really likable in this season. We see that he has learned a lesson and is now trying to be nice to Debbie. Julian is also great in this season, maybe not quite as great as she was in Season 5, but still is very funny and a great friend. Renice Young stopped being story relevant by this point, but I don't think they stopped caring about his character. We still get plenty of lore about his home life, and they also confirm that he does remember his character arc.
What are they gonna do here? Expel me? They couldn't even do that the last time.
Jinhao and Denise's relationship is still a highlight of the series. There are a few jokes that amplify Denise's love of studying or make Jinhao a bit meaner than usual, but we see a lot of how much they care for each other in this season. Towards the end of the season, Mrs. Taylor appears for the first time since her debut. We learn that the reason she expects so much of Denise is because apparently she was a teen genius too, and comes from a long line of them. It doesn't justify her actions at all, but it does at least delve into her motives a little. She also shows up during this season's recess episode mostly to scold Denise. She meets Jianhao though, and Jianhao actually tells her off for her treatment. It's really nice to see someone stand up to Mrs. Taylor. And who better for it to be than Jianhao? Also, towards the end of the season, we get some more promising elements. Teverly steals Sunny's diary and finds out about the heist. Sunny is threatened with expulsion and exposes Jianhao as the leader. This ends the season on a bit of a cliffhanger, with the organization now knowing Jianhao was the leader of the heist and preparing to expel him. Season 6 kind of feels like a transitional period between the golden age of Titan Academy and the dark age. There's still plenty of gems and a fair bit of heart, and I have a lot of nostalgia for this season. But you can tell that it's running out of ideas. We're seeing less of the found family and friendships in favor of being about who can we ship with whom. It's also way less ambitious. On April 16th, 2023, Titan Academy released the last truly stellar episode. Students get in trouble after their secret is exposed. During an assembly, the organization decides to expel and humiliate Jianhao just like they did to Cleverly. They offer to at least spare his hair if he tells them the names of everyone involved, but he selflessly refuses. As they begin shaving his head, Denise stands up and takes the blame for him, and Mrs. Ragna convinces Mr. Allen not to expel her since she's their top student and can make them money. This forces Mr. Allen, who doesn't want to look like a hypocrite in front of the whole school, to let Jianhao go too. At the end of this episode, Denise is so hurt that Jianhao didn't tell her about the heist that she drops the line that no fan of any series wants to hear.
I think we need to take a break.
I remembered this as a jump the shark moment, but rewatching it now and having matured a little, I kinda love it. I adore what this episode says about Denise's character. Denise has always been someone who is characterized as valuing her education more than anything, and yet she doesn't even hesitate to put it on the line when Jianhao's in trouble. She puts her education, her family relationships, her reputation, everything that matters to her on the line just to protect Jianhao, while angry enough to break up with him. That's what I call true love. It's a sad yet beautiful piece of irony that their breakup shows just how much they love each other. I don't want them to stay broken up for the rest of the series, but this is a great piece of character drama that shows that they can have such a fight and still care deeply about each other. Even after they break up, I still love Jianhao and Denise's relationship. James returns as part of the organization. I used to think this destroyed his character arc in the night school, but I'm not really sure I do anymore. I still don't really like it. They don't do anything with him there. He just makes the same threats that Mr. Allen always does, just with a less intimidating and more just subtly manipulative performance. And I personally prefer Mr. Allen's just plain threatening presence. The bulk of this season is spent on another sort of mini spin-off called Study Buddies, which focuses exclusively on Titan Academy's smart students, along with Jianhao and Vincent. It's debatable where the Study Buddies starts. The playlist includes the first 2 episodes of the season, but we don't start seeing the logo for it until episode 3, and the first 2 don't really focus on the group as much, and are more about the relationship between Jianhao and Denise. It starts with yet another exam arc. While not my favorite, I think being about the SATs really helps it stand out. And Teverly trying to sabotage Denise creates a good amount of tension. After that, it becomes about them doing the science fair. It involves the study buddies breaking into 2 groups, with one led by Jianhao and one led by Denise. It felt forced and out of character for Jianhao to try to one-up Denise, and for Denise to trust Teverly over Jianhao, especially since she of all people knows that he isn't a good guy. I do enjoy how Jianhao's experiment saves the day when Teverly destroys Denise's experiment. Teverly serves as the main antagonist for the study buddies, being asked to sabotage Denise. He works well as an antagonist, but there are times where they attempt to portray him sympathetically, and I don't think that really works. They do give him a sympathetic motivation, and they attempt to have him become friends with the study buddies at the end, but I don't think they fully succeed. I find that his friendship with them is really hard to buy, since for most of the season he's just been this arrogant jerk ass who everyone else just finds annoying, And they forgive him for genociding the Gorbazoids way too easily. Maddie's worse than ever. But I guess that doesn't matter as much when she only has one major role. Even if that major role is the one where they create Madhow. At this point they realize that nobody wants Vincent and Denise to end up together. Unfortunately, this doesn't mean they gave up on their obsession with love triangles. They start pairing up Jinhao and Maddie. And unfortunately, this worked, as we now had Team Denhao versus Team Madhow. There really was no debate whether Jinhao or Vincent was better for Denise, but the casual fan could see more chemistry in Jinhao and Maddie if that's what they're into, instead of deep and meaningful stuff. I get why they tried to do this. They wanted to keep fans engaged and give them something to root for. The thing is, a love triangle is the most cliche way you can possibly do that. If I wanted a love triangle, I'd just go watch any old sitcom or generic rom-com or Twilight or whatever. I really thought Titan Academy was better than that. The series was built off meaningful relationships, not just viewing these relationships as a source of cheap drama. Reniciang is now officially relegated to comic relief. Vincent's negative traits are flanderized as expected. He has no concern for Maddie, and his obsession with Denise is starting to get, really creepy. I admit that going in, I had pretty bitter memories towards Season 7. This was the season where I was really starting to lose interest in Titan Academy. But going back to it now, while yes, it did naturally have some duds, I don't think it's much worse than Season 6. It at least took some risks and had some meaningful character stuff, even if its problems are starting to become more and more obvious. Season 8 sucks. It takes everything I loved about Titan Academy and throws it out the window. The once lovable and relatable characters are now just mean-spirited caricatures of who they once were. The once interesting themes are now non-existent, and the story is now just a bunch of love triangles. The humor has also taken a major hit in Season 8, and to a lesser extent Season 7. The jokes are a lot more few and far between, and when they do show up, they're not as clever or character-driven as they once were. Most of them are just rehashing jokes from previous episodes that were done much better then, and even when they're not, they just feel like they're doing the bare minimum. The only story in this entire season is that Vincent and Denise start dating, and the relationship becomes a realistic, toxic relationship. It's not funny, but it's not saying anything meaningful either. It's just depressing. I feel bad for Denise. Now, to be fair, Denise has always been a character we were meant to feel bad for. The difference is, in previous seasons, this was used to say something meaningful. This isn't a story about Denise learning to stand up for herself or exploring why she is the way she is. This is just tormenting her for the sake of pathos. Her relationship with her mother explains so much about why she is who she is. Her relationship with Vincent explains nothing. Maddie isn't just clingy in this season, she's desperate to get to Jinhao. She's now telling strangers that they're a couple in front of him, and even trying to pressure Denise into staying with Vincent just to eliminate her as competition. She of all people should know how horrible Vincent is. Maddie went from being one of the nicest characters in Titan Academy to a downright bad person. I didn't like Jinhao's portrayal in the season either. He felt uncharacteristically selfish at too many points in this season, and we don't even get to see him lead the class or any of his positive qualities. It would have been easy to show off his leadership at times like them having to find the ring, but they just don't. While you could argue that Renice Young's arc was undone as early as Season 5, at least then they had some implication that he had learned something. He's now just simping over Pei-Shi, and that's his entire character. Remember how Kevin gave up his status as the hall monitor because he realized that his friends were more important than power? Well, now he's back to being the hall monitor. This could have worked if it were to protect the others, but they make it clear from the get-go that that's not the case. Why do they do this? Well, to give him a new catchphrase. Remember that gag from the multiverse episode where Vicky was unusually happy? That was funny, because it played with our expectations of the character in a way that made sense in context of the episode. This season takes that gag and makes it her entire character. This could have worked if maybe they developed her to become that, but no, they just alter her personality for no real reason. It feels so cheap, and like they view their characters more as props than as actual characters. Debbie and Julian fare a bit better than the other characters, but even they're not completely spared. They also fall victim to a lot of the love triangles that plague the other characters. Teverly is sent to Class T1T5 to sabotage Denise. This sounds like a great idea that would provide a lot of tension. At no point does he actually make any effort to sabotage Denise. So we're basically just stuck with his unbearable personality, but with none of the tension he normally provides. Diana's now pro-organization. I get that this is done to show Teverly's influence over her, but her claiming that Mr. Allen is a good guy just feels like a betrayal of her previous character development. N4T1 has always been a poor man's T1T5, but here it's not even that. They're just replaced by a bunch of characters that I can't even remember anything about. They are all super forgettable and have no personality. Except Robin, who is actively annoying. Nicole leaves. Trev, Abby, Terry, and many other students are gone now. And Vincent. I hate Vincent in this season. I hate him from the moment he tricks Denise into dating him. And he's not fun to hate. The lovable, insecure, naive Vincent we knew and loved, he died a long time ago and was replaced by Jerk-ass Vincent. Jerk-ass Vincent is just a realistic, emotionally abusive narcissist who gaslights and bullies Denise into dating him and staying with him. He's so controlling of her that it just becomes unbearable to watch. Vincent in Season 8 is what people who hate Xander from Buffy the Vampire Slayer say that Xander is. If there's one character that I do think benefits from Season 8's existence, it's Miss Shirley. I think the reveal that she never wanted to be a teacher actually makes her decision to stay all the more impactful. Another problem I have with this season is that it feels desperate for views. There's a lot of nostalgia baiting. There were a lot of times where they would advertise that they'd do something really big in the newest episode and then just not do it. But the worst thing they do in this regard, they make a Darman title. Come on, Jen Hao Tan. You're better than Darman. There's one episode that I think perfectly exemplifies what made makes this season not work, it's the Valentine's Day episode. My least favorite episode of the series. Just all the love triangles and unlikable characters are in full force in that one. With how much I didn't like the main storyline of the season, you would think I would at least like the season finale where Vincent and Denise break up. But I think that this breakup is really poorly done. I hate how they try to make it bittersweet by both siding the issue, rather than portraying it as a victory and a growing moment for Denise. There's no growth, no depth, no development at all in this season, and this finale doesn't change that. Just because it finishes up the worst storyline in Titan Academy history. I'm not gonna lie, Season 8 almost made me give up on Titan Academy. When I look at Season 8, I don't see the funny yet thoughtful writing or the lovable characters that made Titan Academy truly special to me. I see something that's mean-spirited, bland, out of ideas, desperate for views, and doesn't understand what made its characters so special. And it's all for the sake of adding as many obnoxious love triangles as possible, without any regard for how it affected the story or characters. After this video, I am never watching Season 8 again. I can't stand it. Season 9 was the hardest season to decide my opinion on, partly because the majority of it came out while this video was in production, and partly because it's a mixture of some of the same problems as Season 8 and signs of actually finding its footing back. And luckily, these signs of improvement are apparent almost immediately. The second episode is about parent-teacher conferences, and it's actually a really amazing episode, and it explores each character's home life. The jokes are much funnier in this season. We get more subversive humor, and the jokes in general are just more creative. Plus, we get some interesting plot progressions, like Madam Soup Bing giving birth after being pregnant for the entire series. We even learn that Mr. Allen is Jinhao's father. Not all these progressions work, mind you, but they're far more interesting than just shipping random characters. And they even have some of the themes of the Golden Age. But for one last time, let's talk about the characters. Some of the characters, like Vicky and Kevin, are still pretty much the same as their Season 8 selves. But some of them, like Maddie and Renee, are greatly improved and resemble the versions of themselves that I love. With Renee, we learn why he seems so much worse off than Diana, despite them being siblings. Turns out, their father is abusive to him. It's really sad, but it shows them caring about Renee again. And I really am glad that they're exploring his home life. They also lean into him being a theater kid. I even liked Maddie in this season. Her character is much more in line with the Maddie from seasons 4 and 5. The last few seasons emphasized her clinginess and romantic desires. This season is once again starting to emphasize her lovable traits, like her friendliness, her selflessness, and her extroversion. And we even get to see her old dynamic with Denise. Vincent is still a crazy incel, but they finally punish him for it. I like Jinhao and Denise's relationship, but I think their individual characterizations are still blanderized. Their personalities now are still just smart girl and lazy boy. I miss when their characters had more depth, because it not only made them more interesting, but it also made their relationship more interesting. Plus, I'm kind of just waiting for them to get back together already. The characters that take the biggest hit characterization-wise this season are actually the villains. Mrs. Taylor seems unusually nice, and not in a learned her lesson way. She seems too easily impressed. I liked her as a villain because she explained why Denise was so anxious. Making her suddenly relatively nice kind of takes away the point of her character. And Mr. Allen is no longer threatening. Once we learn he's Jinhao's father, Jinhao suddenly has a bit too much power over him. I also don't like how they write off Ben in such a callous way. I also don't think they've abandoned their habit of building up interesting stuff and not paying it off. During their second ever Squid Game parody, they reveal Tasha to be one of the guards. That's super interesting and makes me more intrigued than ever to find out what happened to her, and she's gone. Even Teverly, who I don't like very much, is given a satisfying conclusion. He slowly realizes what the organization is doing is wrong and eventually exposes them. This causes him to have to break up with Diana and leave. Season 9 isn't perfect. We still have a handful of rehashed plots, dud episodes, and unlikable characters. We're definitely not in another golden age, but the fact that they were willing to pull themselves back up after how far they fell is a testament to how dedicated the people behind this series are. Of course there'll be bumps along the way, but I'll still be along the ride regardless. To finish up, I wanted to show you my tier list of the episodes. It's not complete since they stopped updating this tier list midway through season 8, but if they didn't, the Valentine's Day episode would definitely be an F tier. But I don't want to talk about that now. I want to talk about the S tier episodes. These episodes are the true masterpieces that make Titan Academy what it is. Welcome to Titan Academy both cemented Miss Shirley as my favorite teacher and second favorite character in Titan Academy, and began adding the lore and themes that raised the series to new heights. Upon this rewatch, I found this episode to be where Titan Academy went from great to superb. Types of People in Squid Game is the best parody they've ever done, perfectly balancing referencing the source material, putting a new spin on it, and keeping everyone in character. Types of Students in the Multiverse uses a fantastical story for character-driven humor. It's hilarious the way it alters the characters' personalities. Types of Students in a Fire Drill is my favorite N4T1 episode and has arguably the highest stakes in the series. Types of Students in Exam Results shows just how much T1T5 means to each other, with a ton of heartfelt goodbyes, my favorite of which being the one between Kevin and Renician. Types of Students in Recess is one of the few pieces of media I've ever seen actually give a voice to kids who don't look forward to recess. I like how they don't portray recess as just this happy and wonderful time for everyone. Types of Students in the Morning wraps up Renician's character arc by having him realize that he is loved by his friends and teachers. I Am a Teacher is both the most ambitious and emotional episode. I love it so much that I even took my senior quote from it. Types of Students during class presentations is the funniest episode they've ever made, and uses every character perfectly. Types of Students in a New School is just so relatable. I love how Vincent is characterized. That's how I was when entering a new school. Plus it introduces Maddie, who is also amazing in her debut. But the best episode of Titan Academy from the day it came out to me has always been Types of People Stuck on an Island. Every joke lands, the characters are all used flawlessly. The scene where Jinhao and Denise get together hits me in the feels every time. No matter how they get back together in the future, there's only one.
I want you to know,
I know.
Renee shows off both his newfound quirky personality and the depth of his character arc. And this episode is the deepest look into the relationships between T1T5 as a whole. The campfire scene was always my favorite scene in Titan Academy, but after watching the series in order, I finally realized why. I've seen how much these characters need each other. I've watched them grow and learn from each other. Plus, a lot of them have bad parents and had to fall back on their friends for the support they need. Their lives could have been better, but they got each other. Going into this project, I thought Titan Academy would just be something I loved in the past, but maybe didn't hold up as well. But instead, I got to rediscover how funny, smart, heartwarming, and relatable this series is, and how much I love the characters. But what do you guys think? I don't really know what the general fan consensus is about what the best episodes and seasons are. So, tell me your thoughts in the comments below.